Greetings, everyone. Midakiapi, Wachiapiwi, Imachiapi, Lena, Shichango Lakota, Imataha, the Na Itancha, American Indian College Fund, Chante Washte, Nape Chayuzapi. Greetings, everyone. I welcome you to our November 2023 Native American Heritage Month Book Club event. Cheryl Crazy Bull, the president of the American Indian College Fund. I welcome you here and look forward to being able to share with you today. I'm really honored to be able to introduce Ramona Emerson. Ramona is a Dene writer and filmmaker. She's originally from Tahachi, New Mexico. I think she can share a little bit about herself, but I was really happy when we decided to do another Native American Heritage Month event because I had already read Ramona's novel, her debut novel, Shudder. I had purchased it at the Institute of American Indian Arts bookstore while I was on a visit there. So her novel has been longlisted for the National Book Award and the Bram Stoker Award. It was nominated for the Edgar for Best First Novel. And she has been a finalist in the Pen America. There's several awards here. I better hold this up and read them. The Pen America Open Book Award, the Pen Hemingway Award, and the McCavity, Barry, and Anthony Awards for Best First Novel, and the winner of the Lefty Award for Best First Novel. And I have to say, as a person who read the novel when it first came out and then reread it in preparation for this, very deserving, Ramona. You deserve those awards. Ramona has a bachelor's degree in media arts from the University of New Mexico. And as everyone knows, the College Fund supports tribal colleges and universities. And so one of our goals is to feature the people who graduate from our institutions. And so Ramona has a master's in fine arts and creative writing from one of our institutions, the Institute of American Indian Arts. She resides in Albuquerque, and she and her husband, the producer Callie Byers, have their own production company, Real Indian Pictures. So welcome, Ramona.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for supporting Shudder and reading it. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of novels that, kind of have a thriller aspect of it to them. But for those of you who have the opportunity to read Shudder, I think that the storytelling in the novel really demonstrates that, us as contemporary Native people, we enter into contemporary experiences, contemporary worlds and jobs, but we're also very grounded in our traditions and in our experiences. So I think we'll start with something that really struck me when I read the novel, being a person who's somewhat familiar with, the different traditional knowledge and teachings of other tribal people. You have Rita, the main character, having a very modern job as a photographer, working as a crime scene photographer. And when I read the novel, I thought, well, that's very juxtaposed against the traditional teachings of the Dene people around the dead. So could you speak a little bit about that and kind of what that felt like for you?
Well, sure. Well, I knew that it was going to be a topic that a lot of people didn't want to talk about, and I fully expected that a lot of Dene people wouldn't want to read it either because of what it was about. But I knew also that there were a lot of people who worked around death that were still Dene people, and we still have to live our lives. And even though we have this traditional belief, or in some cases, superstitions about death, we really needed, some people just had to face it because that was our job. And, people like police officers, doctors, pathologists, there are a lot of people who deal with death in their work. And a forensic photographer is just one of them. But I had worked in forensics in Albuquerque for 16 years. And when I first started working there, my grandma was not very happy about the work I had chosen, but it was the only job I could find at the time that was within my industry of working in photography and film. And he was the only guy in Albuquerque who would hire me, was this man, Jerry Goff. And so he trained me to do the forensic work. And I was mostly his videographer. Um, and towards the end of my 16 years with his business, I started to also be his photographer because he started to just not have the physicality to do the work anymore, and he just couldn't do it. So I would be the only one to send out to do anything. But a lot of forensics people forget that a lot of forensic work has to do with people who are alive. I'd say 70% of that work is with people who are alive, and you're working on litigation, and you're working for agencies, you're working to document scenes and all kinds of different things. And I learned a ton. I've learned a lot, all the way from gas and law about land, through to the forensic work and working in that field. So I think that, and then I learned a lot going to the Albuquerque CSI course, because as a civilian, you can take this class in Albuquerque. You just have to sign up for it. You have to write an essay and tell them why you want to learn about this. And when I was beginning to write the book, I took that class, and a lot of the cases that I pulled into the book, either I worked on as a forensic photographer at the corporation, or I learned about in this particular class, including the first chapter. The first chapter of the book is straight from my forensics class with APD, and it was the first case that we learned about. And there was something that the detective said to us when we were learning about that case. And what he said was, "I don't think we'll ever find all of her." And it stuck with me, and it went into that book. And a lot of the stuff I learned, and a lot of the stuff I've seen over the years went into that book. So even though it's titled fiction, it's really based on, they say write what you know, right? So it is really based on a lot of my own experiences and a lot of the cases that I saw working, including
Yeah.
Rita's very first case in the book, where she's kind of has to get smuggled upstairs to take these sneaky photographs that nobody's supposed to know about. That really was my first day of work.
Hmm.
And the fear, that of course the adrenaline that goes through your body when you have to hide, and you have to run up and do something that you're not supposed to be doing, and then run back down. I mean, now that I think of it, it's like, well, what could have they really done to you?
Right.
But when you're in the middle of it, and some guy that you don't really know, who's an investigator, is sending you up to do this work, and you don't know what's going to happen, it's scary. It's scary to do that kind of stuff, and working on the fly and kind of being sneaky. But that's what forensics is about. And you don't always work for the police, but yeah. But so 16 years of that, I think, after about 5 years of going to the medicine man all the time and sending my clothes home for people to say prayers for me. I mean, there were 5 years of that job that I didn't know if I could do it. But I did. And then it continued into 16 years. And by the 15th, 16th year, or even like the 10th year, yeah, you're dealing with death and you're seeing these horrible things, but it's just work. And you instead become a voice for whoever you're photographing. You're a voice for their case. Um, and if you don't document their case correctly, you could lose their case. The person who murdered them or did harm to them could get away with it. And so it's your job to make sure that doesn't happen. And so when you look at it that way, it turns into a different thing. It's an obligation. It's something that you have to do. Um, so yeah, I was a little worried about it, but I
Mm-hmm.
figured if I could do 16 years of that work, then it should be easy to write about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful story, Ramona. I'm really glad I didn't realize that, it was based. So so biographical. That was based so much on your experience. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit further on, or have you elaborate a little bit further on that. What it sounds like your experience went from kind of being fear-based to realizing that you said it turned into an obligation, and it required you to, kind of be the voice. Could One of the things that my team, when they were reading the book, they wondered if that was a metaphor for living in two worlds. And I know
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of our people, really are challenged, like trying to live in this modern society and still uphold the beliefs of our people and honoring that. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
Sure. I mean, I always just kind of felt like, for me, even though a lot of people say that we live in two worlds, I just kind of feel like we just we there's one world, and we adapt the best we can. And I think that there's a need for change. There's a need for transition, and in making this writing this book, I've had a lot of discussions with other Dene people about what that means, and talking about this taboo subject, and what the ramifications are of that, and how do you balance that with what you're doing in the real world. And I think that's just being conscientious of your past. That's still you. Even though you might be doing this work, you still have obligations at home. You still have people that depend on you. You still need to go chop wood. You still need to do the stuff that you think you don't need to do, but you still have to do it. And a lot of people, that's just part of their lives. A lot of us drive 2 or 3 hours home so that we can go deal with stuff at home, and then we go travel another
Hmm.
2 hours, and it's like right back to our 8 to 5 for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we might be able to go back out there and do what we need to do at home. And I think there's a lot of people here, especially in New Mexico, with the Pueblo and the Navajo communities, and ceremonies and things that still go on, that still take precedence over our schoolwork, or over our obligations at work. There is still feast days are still happening, ceremonies still happen, they're still going on. And it is still our obligation to stop whatever it is that we're doing at that point, and go tend to those times, or tend to those obligations. And I think we have a very real obligation to our spiritual lives. So even if you work in this industry and it becomes too much for you, that your home is still waiting for you. And they're there to pray for you and to say things, to bless you and to help you continue your work outside of home. So I feel like I'm always connected to home, even though I may be hundreds of miles away from it. I still know that those people are there, and that they're thinking of me, and that they're wondering if I'm okay. So there's a connection to that. So I never feel like I live in two worlds. I feel like I am here, and that world, that home world, is always with me, and that is my world. The other stuff I do to work, and to have a car, and to pay my rent, or whatever, that is just something else that I
Hmm.
maintain, that's there to help me fill my obligations at home. Because it's not like, I can just drop my job and not do the work I need to do, because I need that so that I
Hmm.
can help at home. So I think it kind of balances itself out. As long as you're aware of your obligations in both spaces, that you're able to do it. You're able to juggle that. And I don't know, maybe it's just something that I have done for so long that I just don't realize that I'm actually juggling two different lives.
Hmm.
For me,
Yeah.
it just feels like one, and
Yeah.
and all of it's geared toward helping home. All of it is
Hmm.
centered around making sure my mom is okay, and my grandma's house is okay, and everything is okay.
I know. I like that. I think that that's really a good advice for people to think more about their lives as integrated. I agree about we do the work so that we can maintain and take care of our
Right.
responsibilities, our obligations. So talk a little bit more about, the places where Rita finds comfort, like with her grandmother,
Hmm.
or I thought some of it was with, she actually, for me, it sounded, I felt like she found comfort in being able to navigate and then share, like when her grandmother's neighbor visits her
Hmm.
and those kinds of things. So talk a little bit about that what, that safe space, that sanctuary, that both people and place represent.
I was very close with my grandmother, and especially I can remember when I was like in my late teens and early 20s, and I was in college, and I didn't have a lot of money or resources and a crappy car and all that kind of stuff that you go through when you're in college. And whenever I would get to a point where I was going to give up in school, or I felt like I was really at a low point spiritually or emotionally, I would just get in my car and go home.
Mm,
And lucky for me, home was 2.5 hours away.
hmm.
So I could get in the car and make my way back home. And there was just something about that place, and I think we all have it. There's a place where I can walk in the door and it's just like I can like breathe, and it smells like mutton stew over there, and it's the can you smell the Indian tea, and there's a fireplace burning somewhere, or I don't know, there's just a smell in a place that we can call home and that we can always return to no matter what. So for me, that feeling I had, I wanted to pass on to Rita as a character. And since character and in her characters, I felt like it's really hard to navigate a world that you know nothing about, like the afterlife. And how do you navigate that? And what are the rules of that place? And the cool thing about fiction is there are no rules. You can make it
Hmm.
up, you can have any rules. And a lot of people ask me about that. Like, you need to write a chapter about how the rules are working in Rita's world. How come some ghosts see her? How come she doesn't see every single ghost? How come some people just look like lights, or some people are images, or some people come to them looking like they died, like they stay the same as they
Hmm.
look when they passed away, or some people don't. And a lot of people ask me to write the chapter that explains all of that, that tells us what are the rules
Mm,
to this world. And I just always rebelled against that, because for me it was like, how do I know? How do
right.
you know? How does anybody know what those rules are? Nobody does. And there shouldn't be rules to that. I mean, like, the spirit world is the spirit world, and they can do whatever they want. And so that's why I think there are so many different levels and varieties of ghost stories and what people see and how people experience the afterlife, because nobody knows and everything is different. Everyone's experience is going to be different. So when you go to those safe spaces like grandma's house, I kind of put things and people there to make that space safe for Rita. So that was like the one place that she could go where these spirits didn't have to come and follow her there, like where she felt she could come and take a breath, where they weren't harping on her or bugging her or asking them to, because that was like her hiding space where nobody could come. And all of that stems from that time when I was in college, and I felt alone sometimes. I felt alienated, and I was able to take myself and go home. And I just remembered that space. And that's why I made that space for Rita, because she needed it.
Hmm.
And for Rita, it's like her cousin who dies helps her create that space. She keeps those spirits away from grandma and from that grandma's space. And I think her grandfather's ghost has something to do with that. Like, so there was a proven place that's safe for Rita, and that's it, where the spirit world won't be there harping on her. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how that safe space came from me to Rita.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I observed that in reading the book. And I also though was really struck by how aggressive, when you said harping, that made me real think about, you know, how
Hmm.
aggressive so many of the ghosts were toward her, and how, her grandfather, it felt very loving. Her cousin felt loving and wild,
Hmm.
and so so in having the ghost be that aggressive toward her, why did you do that, since we don't know? What's in the
Well,
afterlife, right?
yeah, I mean, and that's what's fun. You can just make your characters do whatever. But I felt like those people carry that energy with them into the afterlife. So they how they were in life was really reflected on how they were as they passed into death. And like you say, grandfather was a very peaceful, loving man, and he came to her in that way. And her cousin's kind of mischievous, and and she has a wild streak, just like you say. So her ghost is even has that attitude, even in the spirit world. So for Irma, I was like, okay, so what if there's like a really pushy in life? There's a person who's really pushy and um, never takes no for an answer, and who is, you know, somebody who just goes and goes and goes, a pusher, a pusher, a pusher.
Mhm.
And that's what Irma was in life. She was this woman who worked as a bartender, and she was really aggressive and mean and pushy. And, she had a boyfriend who was a gangster, so she had this
Yeah.
rough world that she was from and that she lived in. So I knew that when she would come back as a ghost, that she would continue to be that person that's kind of aggressive and comes at Rita like, you are
Mhm.
going to do what I tell you to do, because if you don't, I'm just going to keep bugging you. Um,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like Ghost, like that movie. Like Patrick Swayze just kept singing to Whoopi Goldberg, like she kept trying to ignore him, but he was like, "Oh no, I need you to do this. Like I'm going to continue
Right.
to bother you and bother you and bother you until you do what I tell you to do." But this woman is just a lot meaner about it. And
Yeah.
some of the other, I mean, some of them are just. I think some of the ghosts that she encounters are just shocked that they're dead.
Right.
Like that
Puzzled.
one just,
Mm.
yeah, they just don't know what's happening. It's like, why am I covered in blood? What's happened? And they just don't understand that they're dead. And so she has to tell them, like somebody shows up on her in her car
Mhm.
seat, and she was like, "Yep, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're dead." And like
Mhm.
once they realize it, like they're just gone. And but some people just can't deal with it, like Irma. And she had other circumstances. Like she had a baby.
Mhm.
Like she knew she left her baby with her mom. Like so she had this overhanging thing that she couldn't let go of. And she was gonna, pester Rita until she dealt with it. And that's exactly what she did. So that's how kind of I came up with. I mean, that's how just I assume in my own mind how a ghost would be, and it changes all the time. Like I say, because we don't know, and so
Yeah.
every ghost and every spirit and every encounter is going to have to continue to be different or strange, or you know, I got
Yeah,
to just keep coming up with more.
yeah, they ask a lot of her. So talk a little bit about her, the people who support her beyond her grandmother and uh and then of course encountering her other relatives. Can,
Well,
can you talk about them?
she has a friends, that I mean, everybody's got friends. And her friends aren't actually really good for her. Like she has some friends, and one of them, Shanice, that she's known forever.
Mhm.
And a lot of people gripe at me, like, how come this thing is about Albuquerque or New Mexico? How come there's no Pueblos in it? And blah, blah, blah. Shanice is actually Pueblo. Maybe I didn't explain that enough, but in the childhood memory, she talks about how she meets this little girl in Catholic school, and like they're the only two Indians in the whole school.
Mhm.
And so, she has this childhood friend named Shanice who they grow up together, and then they're all the way into adulthood. So they've known each other forever. And I have friends like that,
Mhm.
and so I just kind of thought about our friendship and how long we've known each other. I have a friend who she's a year older than me, but her mom and I, or her mom and my mom, were best friends. So when I was born, like I've known her since like day one.
Mhm.
We've known each other since we were babies, and we played since we were babies, and we still see each other all the time. So, like, what is that kind of relationship like? And then somebody who can relate to you because they come from the same community. So there's like inside jokes that you can tell, and there's certain
Mhm.
things that can happen, and memories that you share through childhood and all the way into your adulthood. And I just kind of took um, just glimmers of all the different kind of relationships I've had with friends over the years and the different people I've had in contact. and at least gave her some friends. And yes, they get into some mischief, and um, they have maybe one or two trips to the club late at night. Everybody's had that experience once or twice. It's like, but I just wanted to give, what would Rita be like in her 20s? Like, what do you do in your 20s? You go
Right.
and you hang out with your friends. You're not tied down most of the time. You're not really tied down by marriage, or sometimes you don't have kids. You just, this is the life. This is what you do. And I really, I think when I even started writing this book, like you talked a little bit about that in the beginning, it's kind of like, it's not really about being Navajo. The
Hmm.
story, that's not what the story is about. It's not all about her Navajo traditional, and I think a lot of stories and a lot of people expect that out of fiction, especially from an indigenous perspective. It's like they want those traditional tales. They want you to talk
Hmm.
about your connection to the creation story. You know what I mean? Like they want you to
Right.
follow that traditional path. And I think a lot of people expect that, like from a Dene or an indigenous storyteller that's writing fiction. They expect to get the reservation experience. And I just felt like you can do that while also showing people that we are, a lot of people don't understand that as indigenous people, we have jobs that are on the res, and we don't all live on the reservation. As a matter of fact, most of us don't. And the fact of our indigenous community is something that's kind of an internal thing for us. Like when we're out in the world and
Right.
we're working in Albuquerque, nobody cares that I'm Dene. And the most of the people that I worked with in forensics could care less. They didn't know. A lot of them were shocked that I was a woman working that beat and like working camera. And you still get the look as a camera person, as a filmmaker. They're surprised that you're running the camera. Like we can't. Like we
Hmm.
don't know how, or like we're not strong enough, or we don't have the technical stuff to do it. So there's a lot of stuff that I think there's expectations that you have as a Dene person and as a woman. And I wanted her to defy those expectations. I wanted her to show people that we're so much more than that. And there's so many women out there doing things just like Rita. And it's not all about connected to her Dene
Right.
back. It's
Yeah.
most of it's not. Most of these people she's working with aren't from her community. And what is that like? People just don't realize that. I think people just
Hmm.
don't realize it.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, I think I realized that the experience that she had with law enforcement was more about her gender
Yeah,
than it was
it
about
really
her
is.
race. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was more discounting her because of she was a woman who had no power.
right.
And so then they didn't have to be afraid of her. They could intimidate her or
Hmm.
do something in that regard. So how about her neighbor who sees
Oh,
her? I thought that is a really, it's almost like you had this other person who could see her
yeah.
and but from a completely different, cultural background, a completely
Mhm.
different life experience. So how did that person come about?
Well, actually, when I was working forensics, midway in my career somewhere, I had a job at this, like it's like Rugi Pharmacy on Fourth in Albuquerque. It's like on the old Camino Real, the old main drag that used to run through Albuquerque, like the trail of commerce that ran up into the Southwest goes through Fourth Street and through downtown Albuquerque. So it's not really connected to Route 66. But this old Rugi Pharmacy was there, and I had to come in because I guess there was some kind of land or ownership dispute about the building. And so I was there to document the building. And there was an old woman in there who basically, I got there early before any of the attorneys, and she gave me a tour of the pharmacy. And it wasn't a traditional pharmacy. She had old herbs, like traditional herbs, like even had Navajo tea. She had all kinds of stuff in there,
Hmm.
and it was all divvied up in jars and envelopes, and there were also, yes, there were some standard remedies, like she had aspirin. You could still get Pepto Bismol at her pharmacy and things
Hmm.
like that. But she had this whole other space that had all these ancient tinctures and all these things in it. and she was showing me around her place, and she was just such a neat lady, and she was very welcoming and warm to me, which is something I'm not used to. When I go on those jobs, people usually ignore me or are not very nice and rude. I don't know why. That's just how lawyers are. I think working on your case, you're just there working for them, and they kind of treat you like that. So I've done that for years, and so when you come into a space and somebody's like, "Oh, come in, and let me show you the space," and then she was telling me about how generations of her aunties, her mom, her grandma, her aunties all ran this pharmacy, and that people from all over the place would come and get remedies. And that's she learned how to do that. So I was like, "So you're like a curandera?" And she said, "Well, yeah, that's who we are. It says pharmacy outside, but all of us in this neighborhood know what we do." And so I kind of just remembered her from many, many years ago in the back of my mind. And I felt like I need to give Rita an old. And when I was growing up and I was in college, I had a lot of friends who were older women, more friends that were older women than were friends them that were my age. So I
Hmm.
had a lot of women who were 40, 50, 60 years old who would invite me over for dinner or would just check on me and say, "How are you? Well, I should take you to lunch," because they knew I was a student and barely making it by and stuff. And they would check on me. And like, it was like having other aunties and moms in Albuquerque that actively cared for me and made sure that I was eating and checked in on me. And I could go there anytime if I needed to talk. And I just took all those women I knew and I put her into a character, and that was Mrs. Santillanes. And Mrs. Santillanes is like, I think I also needed to have like a Catholic kind of a
Mm.
curandera, yes, but somebody who like Rita has this traditional belief, but then also has this ghost and all this other stuff. Mrs. Santillanes is kind of the same way, right? She's Catholic, but she's also a curandera. So she's also got kind of like these two worlds. So there's a lot of things that they can relate to each other. And I felt like almost Rita needed another grandma, in that space.
Mhm.
She needed somebody in Albuquerque to make sure that she didn't go off the rails. Because really, when you're doing that work, I think a lot of people it's real easy to give in to things like alcohol um,
Right.
or drugs, or like you can't sleep, so you start getting into these sleep aids, or you start drinking too much so you can go to sleep, or so that you don't have to think about that case you worked on. And there's so many pitfalls and stereotypes that Rita could have fallen into if she took that path,
Hmm.
right? Like, and I didn't
Right.
want her to become, as a Native woman on this page, I didn't want her to be in that statistic. I didn't want her to become one of those. Yeah, she goes out and has a bender with her friend one time, but
Hmm.
she's not an alcoholic, and she's
Hmm.
not addicted to anything. She just has this problem, and she deals with it very well, I think, because of her own awareness of her spirituality,
Hmm.
and also because she has people like Mrs. Santillanes, and she's got grandma, and she's got Mr. Bit Silly. And so
Hmm.
all of these older people who are looking out for her, and also Shanice, I think, even though she's a bad influence, is
Hmm.
still her good friend.
Right.
And I think so
Loyal.
she has these connections and she has these different people that she can depend on. And it saves her, like
Hmm.
community, like, and having that connection and that spirituality. Even when you deny it, like Rita does, it doesn't matter. These people are still going to pray for you. And, and their prayers are going to work, even
Hmm.
if Rita doesn't believe it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that somewhere in her she knows that
Yeah,
they're keeping her alive, because
right.
that would be otherwise a very devastating thing to have happen. But in the end, she does deny
Right.
that. And so what prompted you to have her do that?
I think her own, well, I'm an atheist. I'm terrible, but I'm also like a recovering Catholic, because I went to Catholic school and I was baptized a Catholic and I went to church and I did all that stuff. But I think I really did it because my grandma wanted me to. And once I got to the age where I graduated from Catholic school and high school, and I just kind of told my grandma, I just don't believe in any of it. And I think religion is evil.
Mm,
And
mm,
I think it's a scam. And they make money and they abuse people and they've killed a lot of people, and all in the name a guy named Jesus. Anyway, I had this whole spiel I gave to my grandma when I got out of Catholic school. And so for Rita, I think I gave that to her. And I kind of felt because she is Catholic and she talks to her grandma like, why do we go to the
Mm-hmm.
medicine man and then we go to church? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is that? So she's always questioning. But I think for Rita, I think if she feels like if prayer and that whole idea of the church and miracles and all of that benevolence really worked, or if the of the what all the prayers that the medicine man did really worked, then I wouldn't be seeing ghosts and I wouldn't be dealing with this and it wouldn't be happening to me because the prayers would work. Because whatever prayers that the medicine man are giving her or singings that they're doing for her, it's not working. And like you say, and it goes like at the end, she's still really in denial of it because now it's even worse. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
reason is because Rita's door is open. Like the
Mm-hmm.
last chapter is called Wide Open because
Mm-hmm.
now, yeah, she helped Irma and she almost died in the process of helping Irma. And that near death experience that she had where she floated up like she was getting ready to go
Mm-hmm.
just for a minute. So she like put her toe into the afterlife. And that just kind of prodded open the door to where now they're all coming. Now she sees even more than she did before. So she's even more into that space where she's like, now I know for sure none of this works.
Mm-hmm. You think
But
this will? Oh, sorry.
no, but then at the same time, it's kind of like, but we know as readers that those her grandma, Mr. Bitsili, and Mrs. Santianes were praying for her. And it was
Right.
like those prayers and that song and all of that stuff brought her back, brought her
Mm-hmm.
back. She doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah,
We know that because
they're not gonna give up on her.
no, they're not going to give up on her, even though
No.
she doesn't think they work. Like, even though
Yeah.
she doesn't know it, she's like, maybe that's why I came back. Maybe it was because they gave me, epinephrine at the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for Rita, it's still like, I don't know.
Yeah. They bring her back and she, you know, I that makes me think that this is her work.
Right.
This is the work she has to do. And I
Yeah.
it's not that I think it's karma or anything like that, but I think, the creator gives you work that you have to
Right.
do. Right. So
And I think even the medicine man realizes it, right? Like
mm,
even Mr. Vasily and Grandma are like, yeah, now we see that it's never gonna stop. It's
yeah,
never gonna let you go because
this is who you are now.
that's who you are and that's what you've been called to do. And as much as
Hmm.
we don't like it, you have to keep doing it because who else
Hmm.
is going to? And
Right.
that's what kind of how the book is about, like how grandma kind of says that to her, like there's a
Yeah.
there's you you have to do this work because if you don't, nobody will.
Yeah. You can't get away.
Right.
Hmm. So what made you decide to become a storyteller through writing and film?
Well, I think when I was very young, I remember watching like The Searchers with my grandma. And my grandma was big on westerns and lots of Charles Bronson and Clint Eastwood movies that I would watch with her. She loved all of those Charles Bronson movies, like the revenge movies
Yeah.
when he go out hunt people down and stuff. Anyway, she was into that and Dirty Harry. But I remember watching The Searchers, and what's funny about The Searchers is like none of the native stuff that they do in that film they get it right. Like, of course, Richard Whitmark is the Indian, right, with blue eyes, and like you see them, and they're supposed to be on the plains, like everyone is dressed like in buckskin, and they have horses, and then they cut to Scar, and they're like in Monument Valley,
Hmm.
and there's all these Navajos sitting around the fire with teepees. I'm like, hold on, none of this makes any sense. Like
Yeah. We loaned you our
this,
TPs.
like I remember like telling my grandma like this is like totally off, and she was like, yeah, she's like it's movie, it's a Hollywood thing, they don't know any better. And I just kind of remember thinking that like, like how come they check everything else on all the rest of the stuff, but not the Indian stuff. And as I got older, I started to realize there really weren't we really weren't in films. Like there weren't people who really were like us. Um, in the films anywhere. It was always, we're always in the past, we're always in westerns, we're always dead, we're always victims, we're always these. And so like as I grew older, I just kind of saw that we had no representation. And there really, this was like the early 90s. There really weren't native filmmakers. There were like
Mm-mm.
Victor Maspaespa, like Sandra Sawa, and like a
Mhm.
handful of indigenous people, Ava Hamilton, right? Were a handful of people that were making film. And even then they were very ethnographic and they were still being controlled by whoever they could get funding by. I mean, except, and or they were having to work on very small, limited budgets. And so we didn't get to see their films, right? Because they weren't
Mhm.
getting widely distributed. And, so I didn't notice any of that until I was in college, just the lack of representation. But when I was in high school, I saw a Spike Lee film, a couple of Spike Lee films, and I realized like, this is how you reclaim.
Mhm.
This guy has figured out how to reclaim culture, and he's doing it unapologetically. And a lot of people are getting maybe put off by what he's doing, but what he's doing is telling the truth. What he's doing
Mhm.
is talking about his own community. We may not like the way he's doing it, or maybe we think he's taking, maybe some people thought he was being racist or whatever. It's like, no, he's just reclaiming that story and that voice for his own community. And I was like, I'm going to do that. And I was probably like a junior in high school when I realized like, I need to do that. Like nobody's doing that. I need to do that. And I already liked movies. I was always into movies. My grandma, my mom, and we just, like I was telling you, we watched a lot of westerns, and my mom watched a lot of horror films and a lot of avant-garde foreign film stuff I had no access to. My mom was into that, and so she's the one that checked me out of school so I could go see that Spike Lee film because I wanted to watch it, right? So like I always had an obsession with film, but it wasn't until I saw Spike Lee doing it that I thought, if Spike Lee can do it, and me with no, I don't have a camera and I don't know what I'm doing, but that doesn't mean I can't teach myself and I can't learn how to do it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go do that. That's what I'm
Mhm.
going to do with my life. And I've been doing it ever since. My grandma bought me my first camera. And I started filming her right away. I followed my grandma all the time. I have hours of her just walking around the house, talking to me about weird stuff, just hanging out, sometimes just sitting in silence and looking at her face in the grandma's yard and hearing the birds. That's stuff
Mhm.
that's time I will never get back with my grandma, right? And I have that. I have those memories stored somewhere. So I think that's how I realized the importance of documenting. And that's
Mhm.
why I think having a tool to document your own history and your own memories was really important. I think that's reflected in Shutter as well, like that importance of documenting and the importance
Mhm.
of storing memories, not only in our minds, but through camera. I mean, and that's kind of why her grandma and her mother and her all have that photography bug. They all
Mhm.
have this connection to a camera because it's like a direct storyline to our histories and our memories and our families and our communities. So, that's, I think, the reason why I did the documentary work and I started to do the film work. I just saw the importance of telling these people stories who nobody would ever meet if it wasn't for you being there with your camera and talking to them.
Mhm.
They'd never know these people. They'd never know who they are and why they do what they do. And that's why I was like Rita, I guess. That's why I was put here to do. I was put here to do
Yeah.
that work and to document, and I love it. I love doing that work. Although now that I've been writing books and I'm getting to the age where the filmmaking is just too much, the
Mhm.
physicality of it, and being the camera operator for 12 hours a day and then driving and like all the stuff that goes into
Yeah.
the work is hard. And I'm starting to slowly pull back from that world and slowly pull back from filmmaking a little bit. We've got 4 projects right now that we're working on, and I have not started another. And that's not like me. I usually have this pipeline of stories that are going, but I can physically tell that I'm already starting to pull away. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
we're just going to finish these 4. And then you guys
Yeah.
are going to leave me alone so I can write books because,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because, yeah. But the book thing and the writing thing, I never in a million years would have thought that I would have written a book. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, I would say absolutely not. I don't like writing. I don't, I
Mm.
don't consider myself a writer. I never have. Um, I mean, I am. I there even when you're
Yes.
working in film, you still have to write. You still have to do that. But I just never thought of myself as a novelist. I never thought I would
Mhm.
do it. And it was just a mentor that pushed me to do it. That's why we have Shutter, because that mentor pushed me into fiction, and she pushed me into doing something aside from what I had been doing my whole life. And I'm grateful to her for doing that, because I had been hiding from writing, I think, a really long time, and it was time that I stopped. And I recently saw my English teacher from high school, who I hadn't seen since I was 17 years old. I saw him about 4 months ago, and I told him, he gave me the writing award for our senior class, which was a shock because I wasn't the best student. And I got, I was, I got an award, and I was just shocked. I was like, I'm one of your worst students. And I was getting this writing award, and I think he told me, "You're a really good writer, Ramona. You should really think about, writing as a career, or and I was like, absolutely not." So when I saw him 6 months ago, and I told him I had a book, and I actually delivered it to his house and signed it to him, um, he was so happy. Like I
Mhm.
say, because I have been avoiding this for my entire life. I've been avoiding writing this book, because I didn't think I could do it, and I didn't think anybody would read it, and I didn't think I could write. So I'm happy that I finally um, gave up hiding from writing.
Me too. I'm happy you gave up hiding from writing because I think that Rita's a great character, and I hope you continue writing about her, and also that, I think it would make a great series or film, so I hope you have that opportunity as well. So
Well,
I
we'll
wanna,
see.
yeah, we'll see. I think I like the accessibility in different modalities for people. So I know
Yeah.
that there are people who aren't going to read Shutter and they're going to miss an amazing story, but they might watch a film or they might watch a series. So
Well,
I
I have two more. I promised my publisher I would do at least two more. So like it
good,
would be a trilogy. Yeah.
good, good,
And
good.
I'm almost done with the second book right now. We're
Yeah.
editing it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, when books are come out with series of characters, I want them to come out quickly. So
I know.
I know writing
That's
doesn't.
what that's what my editor keeps telling me. It's
Yeah,
like everybody's waiting, Ramona. You're taking
yeah,
too long.
yeah. We wait patiently. And so I think the last thing I'll ask, of course, the College Fund supports tribal colleges and universities, and I think we'd really love to hear, maybe talk a little bit about. What it was like for you to go to the University of New Mexico and then get to go to a tribal college. We really like to share that story with people
Okay.
because tribal colleges, just are such special institutions. So if you talk a little
Hmm.
bit about that, we'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
Um, my time at the University of New Mexico was one of the loneliest times of my life. I really, I was the only woman, and especially the only Native woman, but definitely the only woman in the film department. The film department was very young at that point, and I and another gentleman were the first two graduates of the UNM Media Arts program. So they really were just starting the program when I started. So I was kind of like their guinea pig.
Mm.
So I just remember being in classes full of white men, and I felt dismissed. People didn't listen to me. People had some pretty harsh critiquing of my films and my writing, and I felt like I was never getting ahead there. I really did. I felt it was some of the loneliest times of my life, and I'm surprised I graduated. I'm surprised I powered through, because there were times where I just felt like I'd never get out of there. And going to IEI was a different experience. First of all, it was, again, the beginning of a program that was just starting, their first MFA program, and then their first program in MFA program in creative writing. And of course, I was trying out this new thing called fiction, and and I didn't feel like I knew anything about writing. Aside from writing screenplays and grants, I had no idea what I was doing. And I showed up on day one and went to my first class with Eden Robinson, who is a wonderful writer. I don't know if any of you have read
Hmm.
any of her books, but I highly recommend it. She was my first teacher there, and she was my mentor for 2 separate semesters there. And it was immediate. It was the support there, the love, the investment in your work was bar none way better than I had ever experienced anywhere. And I was around people who understood the ramifications of what I was writing. They understood that um, there was so much more community and other things involved in the story I was telling because they understood that. They understood the commitment and the obligation that we have to our communities and how hard we wanted to work to make sure that people were proud of the stories that we were telling. And that's what was so important about this program. It was the first program of its kind, all indigenous, you know, um, writing instructors at first. And I don't know, even the non-indigenous writers, they understood that you were here and that you had these responsibilities to your community, and they supported that, and they
Hmm.
they did their best to get your work up to par. And I am supremely grateful for all the different people I came in contact with at IAIA MFA program, all of my mentors from Eden Robinson, Linda Hogan, Sherman Alexie. I mean, I had a million indigenous mentors there. I mean, people at the top of their game.
Hmm.
And that's why Shutter is so good. And that is why I worked so hard on it because those guys all pushed me really hard and pushed me in the right direction and told me what I needed to do. And I did it. And I thank them endlessly for the work that they did with
That's great. I'm happy. That's what I imagine it's
me.
like to be in the IA program. I think
It
that
is.
that's really great that it is that. So, what are you reading right now? I know you're writing, but are
Yeah,
you reading anything that you want to
I
share with
am.
us?
Well, I'm reading notes on an execution.
Mm.
It's really good. I'm really enjoying it, but mostly I'm reading it because it's about a serial killer, and I am also writing about a serial killer.
Right.
And my second book, my second book is all about the. So I don't have Rita's background to go back and forth on because right
Oh
because we know
yeah.
it all right now. So I've had to figure out a different way to tell the story, and that's how I'm doing it. So
Oh
I've
yeah, I
had to
love
do a
serial
lot of
killer
research on
novels. Yeah, killer novels. I'll remember that one. Notes on an
it.
execution. So thank you so much, Ramona. We had a really great time. It was really
Absolutely.
nice visiting with you, and thank you. Have a great rest
Thank
of
you
your
so much.
day. Thank you.